Farmers mortgaged everything for this machine, then watched it destroy their life's work in a single day. This revolutionary apple picker ruined 500 orchards, and this steam-powered miracle bankrupted entire farming communities. These weren't just failures, they were financial disasters that destroyed generations of family farms. From money pit machines that cost more than houses to crop crushers that turned profits into losses, these innovations promised to make farmers rich but left them broke and broken. Here are 20 harvesting disasters that nearly destroyed American agriculture. Number 20, hand-crank corn shellers, the arm breakers. Hand-crank corn shellers were once common in American farmyards from the 1800s through the early 1900s. These cast-iron machines promised to make removing corn kernels faster and easier than doing it by hand. Farmers would feed dried corn cobs into the machine and turn a heavy crank to strip off the kernels. But these labor-saving devices earned the nickname arm breakers for good reason. The heavy crank would suddenly jam without warning, sending farmers flying backward or hurting their shoulders. The metal teeth would smash kernels into worthless pieces, ruining entire harvests. When cheap electric shellers came along, these torture devices disappeared fast. Number 19, steam-powered threshing machines, the money burners. In the late 1800s, steam-powered threshing machines were the latest and greatest farm technology. These huge machines could separate grain from wheat, oats, and barley much faster than old methods. Steam engines would pull these giants from farm to farm during harvest season, creating quite a show in rural communities across the Midwest. But farmers soon learned why these machines earned the nickname money burners. Boiler explosions destroyed equipment and crops, with hot steam and flying metal turning harvest time into financial disasters. The machines burned through water and coal, often costing more to run than the grain was worth. And when gas-powered combines arrived, farmers dumped these money pits so fast that many were left to rust in fields. Number 18, mechanical apple pickers, the orchard destroyers. The mechanical apple picker seemed like the perfect answer to worker shortages during apple harvest. Introduced in the 1960s with big promises, these machines use spinning brushes to shake apples from trees and catch them below. Farm magazines called them the future of fruit farming, and desperate orchard owners spent their life savings. But these machines turned out to be orchard destroyers that could ruin a farmer's whole business in hours. The violent shaking broke tree branches, and the machines couldn't tell ripe apples from green ones, filling bins with worthless bruised fruit. One Michigan orchard owner lost $50,000 in one season when his mechanical picker destroyed his crop and damaged his trees for years. Number 17, potato digger plows, the potato slicers. Before modern potato harvesters, farmers bought special potato digger plows pulled behind horses or early tractors. These tools had curved metal pieces designed to lift potato rows from the ground while leaving potatoes on top for picking up. Costing as much as a good horse, they were a big investment for small farmers from the 1880s through 1940. But these potato savers often became potato slicers that destroyed more crops than they saved. In rocky soil, the metal pieces would slice through potatoes like knives, leaving farmers with worthless cut pieces that rotted fast. The timing had to be perfect. Too wet, and the machine made a muddy mess. Too dry, and potatoes broke like glass. Number 16, grain cradles, the backbreakers. The grain cradle ruled American wheat fields from colonial times through the mid-1800s. This long-handled tool with wooden fingers could cut and organize grain stalks in one motion. Master users were stars in farming communities, able to cut several acres per day and earning top pay during harvest. But learning to use a grain cradle was like training for combat, and just as hard on your wallet. It took years to master. The wooden fingers broke constantly, and one wrong swing could cut your leg, leading to expensive doctor bills. The work was so brutal that most workers couldn't do it past age 40. When McCormick's mechanical reaper came along in the 1850s, grain cradles disappeared so fast that most were burned for firewood. Number 15. Horse-drawn hay loaders, the fair weather friends. Horse-drawn hay loaders promised to end the back-breaking work of pitching loose hay onto wagons by hand. Popular from the 1890s through the 1930s, these machines used moving forks to automatically lift hay and put it on wagons. Farmers borrowed money to buy these $200 machines, equal to $6,000 today. But these labor savers earned the nickname fair weather friends because they only worked when conditions were perfect. Any moisture would jam the machine, and they always seemed to break down when rain was coming. One Wisconsin farmer watched helplessly as his hay loader jammed during a storm, losing his entire winter feed to rot. Number 14, flax pulling machines, the fiber destroyers. Before man-made fibers took over, flax was America's top crop for making linen, and flax pulling machines promised to change this hard harvest work. Built in the early 1900s, these machines used gripping parts to pull whole flax plants from the ground, keeping the long fibers needed for quality linen. Investors poured millions into flax pulling technology, sure they'd found farming gold. But these machines turned out to be fiber destroyers that ruined more flax than they harvested. The mechanical grippers couldn't handle different plant heights, often breaking stems and destroying valuable long fibers. One Minnesota flax farmer lost his entire $10,000 investment when his pulling machine destroyed 60% of his crop in one season. Number 13, tobacco harvesting sleds, the mud crawlers. Tobacco harvesting sleds seemed like a smart answer to the back-breaking work of cutting tobacco plants while bent over in the field. Workers would lie on these low sleds while horses pulled them slowly through tobacco rows, letting them cut plants without constant bending. Popular from the 1920s through 1960s, they promised to make tobacco harvesting easier. But these comfort devices turned workers into human mud crawlers who suffered more than they saved. Workers lying inches from the ground got covered in dirt, dust, tobacco juice, and bugs. The sleds only worked in bone-dry conditions and were actually slower than hand cutting because of all the problems. Number 12, cranberry scoops, the ice water torture. Cranberry scoops were the main tool for harvesting cranberries from flooded bogs across New England and Wisconsin from the 1800s through the mid-1900s. These wooden tools with long handles and wide-toothed heads could gather floating cranberries from bog surfaces. Workers using these scoops were considered the best cranberry harvesters, earning top wages during the short harvest season. But cranberry scooping was basically ice water torture that destroyed workers' bodies. Workers had to stand in freezing bog water for 10 to 12 hours daily, lifting heavy scoops weighing 30 to 40 pounds when full. The work was so brutal that most workers couldn't last more than a few seasons before their backs and knees gave out. Number 11, hop-picking machines, the brewery nightmares. Hop-picking machines promised to change beer production by making hop harvest automatic. Built in the early 1900s when beer drinking was booming, these machines used spinning drums with wire fingers to strip hop flowers from vines. Brewery investors spent fortunes on hop machines, sure they'd corner the beer market. But these machines became brewery nightmares that made more waste than hops. The mechanical stripping crushed delicate hop flowers, destroying the oils that give beer its flavor. Brewers who used machine-picked hops made bitter, bad-tasting beer that customers wouldn't buy. One Oregon hop farmer lost contracts with 3 major breweries in one season. Number 10, bean threshing flails, the dust bowl makers. Bean threshing flails were the old way of separating dried beans from their pods. These tools had a long handle connected to a shorter hitting stick by leather. For centuries, farmers would spread dried bean plants on hard surfaces and beat them with flails to get the beans out. The rhythmic threshing was a community event, with neighbors helping each other process their bean harvests. But flail threshing was farm torture that created more problems than it solved. The work took days of backbreaking beating, and flailing made huge dust clouds that choked workers and got dirt in the beans. You needed incredible skill, too gentle, and beans stayed in pods, too hard, and they got crushed into worthless pieces. Number 9. Pea vining machines, the green gamblers. Pea vining machines were built to make separating peas from vines and pods automatic for canning companies. These machines use spinning drums with rubber fingers to strip pods from vines, then screens and air to separate peas from junk. Canning companies spent heavily on these machines, sure they'd change pea processing and make huge profits. But these machines were green gamblers that bet farmers' whole crops on machine precision and usually lost. The machines couldn't tell perfectly ripe peas from those that were too young or too old. Breakdowns during the critical 48-hour harvest window could destroy a whole season's work and bankrupt small operations. Number 8. Onion braiding machines, the braid breakers. Onion braiding machines were built to make the old art of braiding onion tops together automatic. For storage and selling, these machines tried to copy the hand braiding method that had been used for centuries to create nice onion braids that could be hung for storage or sold at high prices in markets. Farmers bought these machines hoping to speed up the time-consuming braiding process. But these time savers were braid breakers that made loose, weak braids that fell apart during handling. The machines couldn't adjust for different onion sizes and needed perfectly dried onions with strong tops. They were expensive for what was basically a looks-only process and couldn't match experienced hand braiders. Number 7. Celery harvesting machines, the stalk smashers. Celery harvesting machines were built to make the hard work of cutting and packing celery automatic. Celery traditionally needed workers to carefully hand harvest each stalk to keep quality. These machines used moving belts and cutting parts to harvest celery stalks and get them ready for market, promising to cut the high labor costs that made celery farming barely profitable. But these machines were stalk smashers that often made uneven cuts and damaged stalks, reducing their selling value big time. They couldn't judge individual plant ripeness and quality like human harvesters could. Most growers found that the quality loss completely wiped out any labor savings, making the expensive machines worthless investments. Number 6. Strawberry harvesting machines, the berry crushers. Strawberry harvesting machines were one of farming's biggest attempts at automation. These machines used spinning brushes, air suction, and moving belts to pick strawberries from low-growing plants. Built in the 1960s and 1970s with big promises, they were supposed to solve the huge worker shortage problems that hit strawberry growers during the short harvest season. However, these machines were berry crushers that couldn't tell ripe from unripe berries, and the mechanical picking damaged the delicate fruit, cutting shelf life dramatically. The machines also picked leaves, dirt, and junk, along with good fruit, needing sorting that often cost more than hand picking. Number 5. Cabbage cutting machines, the headhunters. Cabbage cutting machines were designed to make cabbage harvest automatic. Traditionally, workers had to walk through fields with sharp knives, cutting each head individually at the perfect height and angle. These machines used spinning blades to slice through cabbage stems while moving belts collected the heads, promising to change large-scale cabbage operations. But these headhunters struggled to cut cabbages at the right height and angle, often leaving too much stem or cutting too close to the head. They couldn't judge individual cabbage ripeness and size, and the cutting parts constantly got clogged with leaves and junk, needing constant fixing that took more time than any savings. Number 4. Lettuce harvesting machines, the leaf destroyers. Lettuce harvesting machines tried to automate one of farming's hardest crops. These machines used different cutting and collection systems to harvest lettuce heads. Traditionally, workers had to crawl through fields on their hands and knees, cutting each head perfectly and packing them right away into boxes for quick cooling. But these machines were leaf destroyers that faced the challenge of lettuce spoiling extremely fast and needing immediate cooling. They couldn't match the smart judgment of human harvesters in figuring out proper ripeness and quality. The mechanical handling damaged delicate leaves, making them worthless for top markets and destroying profit margins. Number 3. Asparagus harvesting machines, the spear breakers. Asparagus harvesting machines were built to handle the unique challenge of harvesting asparagus spears, which must be cut at ground level when they reach the perfect height, usually 6 to 8 inches. These machines used cutting parts and detection systems to find and harvest spears of the right size, promising to eliminate the need for daily hand harvesting during the busy spring season. But these machines were spear breakers that couldn't make the fine choices needed for quality asparagus harvesting. The machines often cut spears that were too short or left others that grew too tall. The cutting parts constantly damaged emerging spears and couldn't navigate permanent asparagus beds without causing huge damage that hurt future harvests. Number 2. Grape harvesting machines, the vine shakers. Grape harvesting machines were built to make wine grape harvesting automatic, traditionally done by hand to make sure only perfectly ripe grapes were picked for premium wines. These machines used violent shaking to remove grapes from vines, while collection systems gathered the fruit, promising to cut the huge labor costs during the short harvest season when timing was critical. But these vine shakers were quality destroyers that used mechanical shaking to damage delicate grapes and couldn't tell ripe from unripe fruit. The machines picked leaves, stems, and junk along with grapes, needing sorting that often took longer than any-time savings. While some modern versions work for cheap wine production, premium wineries still insist on hand harvesting. Number 1. Cotton picking machines, early versions, the cotton killers. The early cotton picking machines of the 1920s and 1930s were the biggest attempt at farm automation in history. These massive, complex machines used spinning parts to remove cotton from plants, promising to change the South's economy by eliminating the need for large crews of hand pickers during the critical harvest season. Investors poured millions into cotton picking technology. Sure, they'd found the key to farming gold, but these early machines were cotton killers that constantly jammed, couldn't tell ripe from unripe cotton, and often picked more leaves and junk than actual cotton fiber. They were extremely expensive, costing more than most farms were worth, broke down constantly, and needed huge field changes to work. The machines destroyed more cotton than they harvested, and it wasn't until the 1950s that reliable cotton pickers finally worked. These 20 harvesting disasters proved that innovation without understanding can bankrupt farmers and destroy livelihoods. From exploding steam engines to crop-crushing machines, these failures shaped modern agriculture through hard-learned lessons. What harvesting innovations do you think will fail next? Subscribe to discover more agricultural disasters and watch our next video about the garden tools that nearly ended their inventors. The stories will shock you.